it's always a great pleasure to have you in this very important webinar, and greetings for 2026. This is our first webinar, as the Global Campaign for Education. So I fully welcome all of you first to 2026 and then to this webinar. I hope that I will have good discussions and that we will engage meaningfully as we share a lot of issues that we have lined out as indicated in the agenda. Please feel free to use the chat, the facilities that we have, so that you can share your thoughts as the panelists that we have lined up are sharing their interventions. But thank you so much for making time to join this webinar. This webinar is actually coming in today, as we celebrate the International Day for Education. Today, on the occasion of the International Day of Education 2026, we reiterate our commitment to a simple but powerful truth that education is both a fundamental human right and a public good. It serves as the cornerstone for dignity, equality, opportunity, and forms the basis of peace, just, and sustainable societies. Despite this, millions of learners, especially girls, children with disabilities, individuals in rural and conflicted affected areas, and displaced populations continue to face barriers to accessing education. In light of concurrent global challenges, including climate change, economic volatility, and diminishing civic space, we cannot allow education to be treated as a privilege, a commodity, or a discretionary budget line item. This year, we urge governments to ensure and safeguard public investment in free, quality education, to implement regulations curbing the commercialization of education, and to ensure that education systems are inclusive, gender responsive, disability inclusive, and responsive to climate concerns. We call upon the international stakeholders to alleviate unsustainable debt burdens, reform inequitable tax regimes, and prioritize education across all strategic frameworks at national and international level. Furthermore, it is imperative that those most directly impacted, like students, educators, communities, and civil society, particularly from the global south, are meaningfully involved in education policy making processes. Policy directions should be informed by lived experiences rather than market dynamics or short-term political interest. On this International Day of Education, let us reaffirm our collective responsibility to uphold education as a right, invest in it as a public good, and support every learner whose future depends on our decisions today. So we have lined up a number of speakers, that will be calling out, for the first sessions, which I will be moderating. We do have two speakers, Imad Sabi and our president, Rifat Sabah. Both are not new to the movement. They are well known. Imad is an independent
L'imam est indépendant aux ZAC et a travaillé, bien sûr, dans plusieurs organizações.
E alguns colegas que...
EOL. Así que voy a invitar a Imad para que comparta con nosotros
on what social movements are and what social movements should be doing in the context in which we are all living in today. Over to you, Imad.
Thanks very much, Grant, and hello to everyone. Apologies for not being able to appear on the video. My laptop is not allowing me to do that today. I was fortunate to be invited by GCE to conduct a review together with two other colleagues of GCE's work over the past half century. And that allowed us to look into some issues such as GCE's presence in global and international policy spaces for education a little bit carefully. It also allowed us and forced us to look at the big picture, the world which GCE now operates in, and what opportunities and threats it poses for GCE as a right to education movement. So with some of the insights, some of the lessons learned from that review, I'm hoping to share with you an attempt at drawing a big picture of where GCE is in today's education landscape and to place that within broader global changes. In preparing for today's presentation, I thought, what could be an appropriate title? And the one that came to mind was Surviving in the 21st Century. Because, nowadays when we think of all that's happening, really survival is such an important thing in itself, to be able to navigate this very chaotic and this very troubling and very dark period. It is important for movements like GCE to stay afloat, to keep their head above the water, really at a time when multilateralism is under such serious attack to the point that global governance institutions appear to be not functioning anymore, where the UN system is also appearing weaker and weaker by the day, and where there is a systematic attack on civil society and all independent expressions which go against the grain. So to survive this chaotic period, this period of uncertainty, and this period of sustained attack on global governance and on civil society is really such an important thing. So let me emphasize a few points here. One is, when multilateralism and global governance, as we know it, as GCE, was one of the movements globally which I think can claim that it benefited from the atmosphere around a more inclusive global governance, and it also contributed to it, like all other movements that accepted to be part of this arrangement and brought its voice to different policy platforms. So when the multilateral system is under attack, one responsibility is to defend it. So really, in today's world, despite all the shortcomings of the international institutions that GCE has been part of, that GCE has struggled sometimes with because of some directions that these institutions took, it's important for GCE to play a role in defending all institutions that represent this more inclusive form of governance which civil society is a part of. It's a point to underline because, the US, for example, has been very, very clear in that it will be transactional. It will be instrumentalizing its participation, in all institutions. It wants them to serve its interests in a very, very direct, naked manner. Cutting off funding to education cannot wait, for example, is a case. We don't like what this organization is doing, and we will cut off funding to it. So when that happens, when an organization like ECW, which was set up to be a multilateral platform to fund education in emergencies, is coming under such attack, GCE's responsibility as a global movement defending the right to education is really to defend ECW, to defend the independence of these institutions. So it's a very important part of the strategic engagements that GCE has to set itself to be part of. The second thing is, while defending multilateralism and global governance, despite all these shortcomings, as I said, it is important for GCE also to balance both being an insider and to be connected in a very strong way to movements and to actions on the ground. And I say this with an eye towards mobilizations that happened in the past few months across different countries, from Morocco to Madagascar to Nepal to Bangladesh. The Generation Z protests, which were expressions of one, a lack of trust in organized politics, of institutionalized forms of mobilizing and claim making, which could extend also to civil society, not only mistrust in political parties, but also maybe lack of trust in also organized NGOs, in organized forms of activism, in organized forms of mobilization. So this is, the Generation Z is a case of what a researcher called Sarah Pickard described as do-it-yourself politics. So when you don't have, faith in the political institutions, then you take action yourself, and you do it outside the framework of organized politics. You do it in decentralized ways. A lot of the mobilization takes place online. There's a lot of flexibility, and there's a lot to learn from that. This is not something new. We had seen it before, but the fact that it persists means that there is a lot of energy on the streets amongst this very large population, which forms significant sections of the population in some countries, and which has grievances which have not been met and have not been embraced or been addressed correctly by either political parties or civil society organizations. I have been looking at the case of Morocco's protest at the end of last year. So this was the period September to December, when young people were out on the street and they were demanding education, health services, and opportunities. These were their demands. And it's an important protest because it had education as one of its key grievances and its key demands. And when you look at that case of Morocco, so you have young people on the street raising banners of education. They want quality education, they want accessible education. And very clearly they were also saying that the privatization of education was instrumental in perpetuating and deepening inequalities, which they are victims of. So when you have that group of young people on the street embracing education as a cause and putting it on the agenda, for public debate, for claim making towards the state, where was the organized right to education movement? Is a question that that moment raised. So I'm mentioning the case of the Gen Z protest because it is important for organized movements like GCE to connect to this energy and to be able to give it articulation, to be able to voice its demands, its concerns in a language which is able to resonate with broader publics and also be part of renewed and deeper claim making towards the state, towards the international institutions. The balance then that GCE needs to maintain here is between using and maintaining its presence in the global policy spaces, defending multilateralism, and being very connected to movements on the ground. The third point that I wanted to highlight is, what does having seats at the table mean for GCE? GCE has, throughout its history, because of the broad umbrella it represents, it has gained access to the tables of different regional and international policy spaces on education. Our review of GCE's presence and their actions and their impact in those spaces, what it showed is that over the past few years, there has been less coordination between the different civil society groups participating in spaces like GPE, ACW, and other, you can think of many other such spaces. So the need for strengthened coordination is an important one to underline here. For GCE to be able to play this role of defending multilateralism and being able to connect movements on the ground to these international policy spaces and regional policy spaces also requires heightened coordination, strengthened coordination between the different civil society groups that participate in those spaces. That has become weaker. It's much less than before. And it needs also clear strategies. And I think part of the discussion today, part of the inputs, the important contributions that other speakers will be making from within the GCE family, look at this, how are we performing in this space? How are we performing in that space? And then it's important to ask, are we coordinated? Are we really going with agreed demands, with agreed strategies? And what impact are we making? And this should be subject of continuous review. So these are my 3 points as part of the big picture. GCE's role in defending multilateralism and more inclusive global governance arrangements. This has many consequential aspects which GCE needs to consider, balancing its presence with really connecting very strongly to movements on the ground, and thirdly, ensuring that having seats at the table comes with stronger coordination and with an intention to achieve bigger impact. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Imad, for really highlighting those key moments, points, but also for really taking us back to the evaluation itself. That gives us, a lot to look at. But thank you so much for highlighting the key points. I like the one that focuses very much on strengthening coordination between different CSOs that are occupying different spaces, within the global education advocacy spaces. So we will ensure that, we take that on board, as we move forward in our 2026 planning. But thank you so much for your inputs. I will now invite Rifat Sabah, who is the president of the Global Campaign for Education, but so he is the Secretary General for ACIA, but he also sits on the board as a president, but also representing the Middle East. Over to you, Rifat. Rifat will take us on how political awareness shapes effective advocacy and engagement in global and national spaces. Over to you, Rifat.
Thank you, Grant. Happy to see Imad also, and to hear him always. Maybe I will speak also in the context that Imad has been present, which the question always, how the political shapes effective advocacy and the impact. And this is the question always we asking ourselves, even when we saw something like what happened in Morocco or in different countries. First of all, it's the political awareness, the advocacy. Effective social change cannot happen without understanding the political context, which politicize and shape the decisions are made. So we have to know who is involving in this political dynamic, who hold the power, how the decisions are made, which interests and forces influence the policy, and where the opportunity for influence exists at the local, national, and the global level even. This is very important for those who work on advocacy to understand this map. And also political awareness, when it's happened, when it exists in the advocacy movement, it helps to transform the commitment and passion into organized strategy action. In this context, I mean, then we will be able to identify the decision makers, understanding the pressure they face, building alliance, and seizing the right political commands. And if this is personally, I passed in the last 2 years in many things, making us asking ourselves what the advocacy strategy that we followed all these years, did we succeed and why we failed? So one of the things that I realized that engaging with the government, not just opposite this government, not just criticize the government, you have to engage in this power, because the power also is not just linked to the government. You will discover that it exists within corporations, international institutions, media, donors, and even the civil society itself. So if you are not engaging with all these powers, you will not be able to find your way in advocate and have influence in the policy that you want to change. So strengthening the national advocacy, it's need the political awareness, because understanding all these laws, legislation, all these policy windows that exist at the national level, even involving and understanding all these political parties who have also influence, also holding all these leaders accountable. So any transform citizen into active political actors rather than passive observers. So some of the civil society, they are used to go to the criticism much more than to involve. That's, I think, and if one of the example, the leagues, the sector, the educational sectors group, which exists in many countries. This spaces is very much important. It's very important for us as a civil society to be engaged in order to know all these players. So, and also enhancing effectiveness in the global spaces. It's very important when you know that all this platform is not neutral, because in this way, the advocacy and the political awareness, it's helping you to build the international coalitions. And this is one of the lessons that we learned in the last 2 years. You have to be very close to the international player and to engage always with this power. When something happened, you can really build your alliance with these players. Also, you will be engaging in this international platform. You will gain the language of the policy and diplomacy. You will understand how the people think. You will develop your discourse. You will even revisit your thinking, your attitude. Then it will help you also to be more influential so elevate local issue into global agenda is very important. And all of us, we know that now you cannot say that at the national level, there's no local policy alone can be separated from the region and the global agenda. So all of it's linking. So that's why you have to be also aware about all this dynamic at the regional and international level. So to ensure global commitment reflect real community needs. Also, now in many crises, in many countries who have a crisis, you need also to have advocacy on the international players. You cannot just make the advocacy at the local level. And all this in order to be able to play effectively, the political awareness is one of the most important things. So also the political awareness as a movement, we will protect our movement from co-options. It will detect symbolic gesture and empathy rhetoric. We will able to question unfulfilled promises. We will maintain independent and critical engagement. So this is always in the GCE, we say that education is not neutral. Education is politics. So all of our members, they should have political awareness. And in our discussion in the GCE, we speak about the academy, the political academy. That's why we need the political academy. We want to build members in GCE who have this awareness, and they can read all this dynamic. They can read all this, even ideologies surrounding him in this. So
1 minute, Rifat.
So what I want to say that building credible and sustainable leadership who really have a political awareness, they will really help to build their community strongly. They will negotiate without losing a principle. They will anticipate risks. They will act a strategy rather than react impulsively. So finally, what I want to say that the political awareness does not mean partnership. It means purposefulness. It bridges the gap between values and power, moving advocacy from protest to policy, from voices to victors, from idea to real impact. So this is the flat that all the advocates should stand if they want really to make change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rifat. And for reawakening our political consciousness on what we have to do as civil society. And thank you so much for also highlighting the issue around the political academy, which we will be establishing this year. So thank you so much for that. in GCE, we do have a youth and student constituency, and they have also been engaged in the same spaces that we have all of us been engaged in. And Asante Swa.
Thank you. I'm hoping everybody can see me. I don't have the greatest connection, so should there be any issues, I'll have to turn my video off. Thank you so much, Grant, for the opportunity. I think in listening to the conversation so far and noting the declining multilateralism and the shift in global institutional powers, young people more and more are finding ways of responding. And I think the power of young people lies in our collective mobilizing, in challenging power structures and making our voices heard. I think also to the example that Imad had used earlier about what's happening in Morocco, we're seeing more and more of a trend happening across the global south with regards to what young people are calling for in terms of education. But more so today, I'm speaking with regards to what at GCE we have been working on as young people at this International Day of Education that recognizes young people as agents of change, particularly in the inclusive and equitable fight for quality education. So I'm seeing comments. I don't know if we're addressing those.
Okay, please proceed. We'll be attending to those.
Sure. So at GCE, the mantra of co-creating with young people is something that we've been working on, I think, for the greater part of the last 10 years. The participation of young people in co-designing our learning platforms and co-designing our research, as well as the development of youth-specific policies in education. Around 2023, GCE welcomed its first youth action group and then its second in 2025. What this structure is
We can't hear you, Asante Swa. You seem to have frozen. Asante Swa, can you hear us?
No, I think she dropped off.
I think he has dropped. Okay, we will bring her back, once she's online again. But we will proceed, and we will bring her at, towards the end of the program. But I will hand over now to Giovanna, who will lead us into the next sessions. Over to you, Giovanna. And just to note that we will bring the youth conversation at the end once we have Asante back. Thank you so much. Over to you, Giovanna.
Okay, thank you so much, Grant. So good morning from my side, everyone. It's so good to see you today, colleagues, and especially to facilitate the session 2 of our conversation, especially with such a great group of speakers this morning, all of them GCE members, most of them board members in our session 2, who have been directly engaged in negotiations across different spaces at the UN, at UNESCO, and many other multilateral bodies. So for this session, we will continue with similar questions, similar reflections, but focusing on different spaces we engage with, considering such challenge scenario that colleagues have stressed. We asked each speaker for a very brief reflection to help us to collectively reflect on lessons from the past year, but more importantly, to look ahead. So from your vision, lessons learned and experience so far, what we should consider as we collectively strategize for the year ahead, right? The challenges you see, but also our strength as a movement. This is really important to ask. Considering the powerful members and partners at the national, regional, and global levels. We all know we learn a lot from this kind of exercise. So thank you so much, colleagues, for taking the time and for being with us today. I will kindly ask everyone to be brief. We have a maximum of 5 minutes for each. I'm very confident this won't be a problem. Our speakers are very well experienced in delivering short and inspiring interventions. So we will start session 2 with Rifat again. Let me start with Rifat Sabah. He is, as all of us know, the GCE president, and he has been representing. Now, for this session 2, we'll be focusing on his participation in the high-level steering committee, the SDG4 high-level steering committee, which is definitely one of the key global governance spaces for education. Coordinated by UNESCO, it covers the full spectrum of SDG4 agenda and brings together different stakeholders, governments, usually represented by the ministers of education in this case, but also multilateral organizations, CSOs, teachers, youth, and also the private sector in this case. So this multi-stakeholder space, we have been there represented by Rifat, a CSO.
Alors, la CME est représentée en tant que société civile dans
seu pensamento, os desafios, sucesso, algo
riesgos que tenemos que examinar para el 2026. Así que, por favor, comparta su...
Oh, thank you, Giovanna.
شكرا جزيلا جيفارا.
As all of we know that all these spaces is a political spaces, not just only a technical commitment there. So achieving inclusive, equitable, quality education, it's also shaped by the power relation that exists in these spaces. Funding priorities, competing vision of purpose of education. It's also linked with all this power relation. So the civil society, when we exist in all these spaces, this is where we have to be sure that our vision there. And I can tell you, not just GCE, because there is a lot of civil society players in these spaces. Without the civil society voices, the situation will be disaster. You will see the privatization exist everywhere, despite now our fears that the privatization start to come in. So our role as a civil society in these spaces to be sure that this education as a right, complementary and free education we should keep it because this free and complementary education and considering education as a right, not just needs, there is thousands of comrades and brothers who pay a lot of a price in order to keep this on the table. So being in the all these spaces, high-level steering committee or education cannot wait steering committee or the high-level political forum or all these United Nations system spaces where they provide political leadership for the SGD4 especially. And in these spaces, we coordinate together all the education actor globally. Also, our role is to monitor the process that the government, especially the government, has been committed to the education, the SGD4, especially. In practical, these spaces reflect tension between education as a public good and market-driven, resulted-oriented approaches. This is where we are trying also to fight to keep the education as a public good. I think in all these years, the voice of the civil society in this regard has been strongly noticed. And that's why we have, even in these days, after what is going on this world, our effort should be increased, and we should insist that education, health, all this should be always rights for the people. So the civil society engage is not symbolic. Our engage in these spaces. It's also essential because bring live realities, not only data. Always the civil society who is working on the ground bring always the realities. And also the civil society, sometimes their voice is even much stronger than the government, because the government sometimes linked to the bureaucracy, and even if they have to take any position during any meeting, they have to back and to in a very long bureaucracy approaches, which is sometimes the civil society have fastly move to highlight some of the important issue. So reforming the education as a human rights, not a commodity, is one of the things that I think that civil society has been succeed to achieve. I will say again, however, the participation in these spaces without political awareness is risky, because it's took sides. And this is very important for all of us to work more to deepen the awareness at the political level. All those who work in the social movement, if they are not politically aware, their work will be go somewhere we don't wish to see. So,
Rifat, sorry to interrupt. Just you can wrap up. 1 minute, please.
Okay. I will show some of challenges that we are facing in these spaces is really the growing influence of the private sectors. But it's clearly noticed. Framing education as a market. These voices, you can hear it more and more. Prioritizing efficiency over equity. This is one of the things that we are also, one of the challenges that we are facing, beside public-private partnership, and not financing models that weaken state responsibility. So the narrowing of education to technical metrics is one of the problems that also we are trying to face. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rifat. Thank you so much for highlighting the power relations and the tensions involved in those negotiations, also the importance of the CSO role, of our voice that is not symbolic, and the main challenges involved. From your experience, thank you so much for that. That was very helpful. We will now continue the conversation, inviting Nelsie Lizarazo. She's the GCE Vice President and also the General Coordinator of the Latin America Campaign for the Right to Education, CLADE, our member in Latin America. She was also part of the HLSC, the High Level Steering Committee, and particularly with a vital role in its Sherpa group over 24 and 25, correct, Nelsie? And so building on Rifat's reflection and looking ahead, Nelsie, with now considering with less than 5 years to 2030, we know there's still a lot of unfinished business alongside new and emerging challenges for the right to education and to achieve SDG 4. How can we prepare? I know that's not an easy question, Elsie, but your reflections will be very welcome. How can we prepare for the post-2030 discussions while ensuring that the SDG 4 targets are not forgotten? What would be your suggestions, your reflections, recommendations? So over to you, Nelsie. You have 5 minutes.
Muchas gracias, Giovanna. Thank you so much, Giovanna. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, according to where you are. Greetings from the CLADE. We have thought about these questions many times, and we've been thinking about this question a while ago. And we like it a lot because it's a very concrete question. It's about how. How can we as movements and organizations, civil organizations, to prepare to the deliberations and to guarantee that these deliberations towards 2030 are there, and also to not forget the SDGs 4 from CLADE. And as a global movement, I would like to propose two concrete paths in which I think we can follow and achieve both, to prepare for the debate as well as to sustain and keep the advantage or the advances on the SDG 4s. Our proposals are come from something that we have to think of post-2030, which is like some sort of social procrastination. It's like, oh, now that we're so far away from achieving the goals, then let's think what we're going to do after, because we couldn't actually achieve this. And the effect is that we not only think what we leave things without doing, we abandon things. So we want to propose you to assume these 4 next years as the time we have to achieve the best conditions for a future period. So how can we use this proposal? One path, the first path is as follows. Let's think about the SDG 4s, including the topics that have been located in the educative agenda as new realities, even though they're not, like climate change, human mobilization, digitalization, AI, and also the youth, and of course, sustainable finance. None of these areas is external to the SDG 4. So this can actually help to achieve these central goals, which is education for life, financing, etc. The political challenge from our point of view is to make this connection visible in a systemic manner to avoid these subjects turn out into parallel agendas and diminish the responsibilities and make us actually fight for the resources. To defend any framework post-2030 has to include the SDGs 4 that have not been accomplished. And in this way, we can avoid the fragmentation of the processes that we know they delay the transformation. For that, a preparation towards 2030 is not to abandon SDG 4, is to use it as a common architecture that allows us to connect these debates. If we achieve that these 4 years accomplish that, then we're not only going to reinforce the commitments that haven't been accomplished, but also be prepared for a post-2030. The question that we need to ask, for example, is what are the connections or the positive impact or not, and the challenge that these new realities are supposed to be for these goals or challenges. So we need to have three debates: the sustainable finance for the right to education. We think that is important to have at least three debates, processes that are linked to the guarantee of this right, which is the sustainable finance. One, also the open debate by the General Secretary of the UN to keep using the GDP as a base of the decision making. Then the debate that requires more research and positioning on the financing mechanism. This can be very useful to generate enabling condition to advance in the SDG 4 and beyond. This is our proposition from the Latin American Caribbean region. Thank you so much.
For such inspiring and sharp and concrete suggestions. Very helpful as we prepare our engagements at all levels. We'll definitely continue this conversation. Each intervention will open a different box here. It opens a new debate. We'll follow up on each of these. And now, in the interest of time, I will invite other colleagues to join the conversation. And now we will invite a few colleagues who can help us to look at specific thematic areas in which particular advocacy strategies are needed. We will start with gender and education. For that, I'd like to invite our colleague Florence May Cortina, or Maya, from our regional member ASPE to join this conversation as well. We asked Maya to focus specifically on the movement's gender transformative education and our advocacy in this area at the global, regional level and national level. A lot has been happening, we know, in a very challenging scenario and context. So Maya, what gains have we achieved? What can we expect going forward? And how can we work together to strengthen this vital agenda? Over to you. You have 5 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gio. Good evening to all. Let me start first by saying that 2025, the start of 2025 was a very scary period. And yes, it was the comeback of Trump, and he immediately attacked gender equality, diversity, and inclusivity. So that is the context. There was a rise of conservative governments, and there is a gender backlash. And when strong forces are attacking movements for gender equality and social inclusion, did we break? Did we retreat? Did we surrender? The obvious answer is no. We did not break. We did not retreat. We did not surrender. In fact, we pushed back and strengthened our ranks. But there were casualties. Of course, programs and some organizations folded up because of the closure of USAID. There was an existential crisis of UN Girls Education Initiative, UNGAI, and last August, we rallied enough forces so that we could petition that the UNGAI, should be preserved. And so that was good. We were able to, help UNGAI, but of course it is now existing under a different arrangement. And then we had in 2024, we were able to have the Gender Transformative Education Glossary, and it means that the UN had already accepted the language of GTE, and that is a very important victory in 2024. And did we lose that glossary? No, we did not lose it. So it means that 2025 was really very memorable in terms of us pushing back and of strengthening our ranks. And by strengthening our ranks, I can say that the education coalitions, GCE, ASBE, CLADE, and I think other education coalitions linked up with the feminist movements and other movements. And so I think that is the most important. So we are part of the Feminist Network for Gender Transformative Education. GCE is closely working with UNGAI, ASBE also, CLADE, and other coalitions. And so we were able to shape the agenda for 2026 up to 2030. We have been able to draw up a global roadmap for 2026 and beyond. And let me now say that in terms of defending our position, we were able to defend and we were able to strengthen our ranks. I just have three recommendations on how we can work together for GCE. Number one is leveraging the expertise, experience, and resources within our ranks. Education coalitions are networks also. They have grassroots organizations, they have education service providers, they have teachers organizations within their ranks. The regional coalitions have a lot of diversity in members, and therefore we should, hold on to that. Second, we should link with other social movements and other entities. So there is a traditional view of adaptation by competition. The feminist view
is 35,000.
Feminist view of biology is adaptation by cooperation. So, for example, during the Financing for Development Summit, I know that a lot of feminist organizations were there. And so I think GCE, those who attended from GCE, I am assuming that they were able to link up with those feminist groups. For education technology and AI, ASBE, reached out to other entities, not the traditional CSOs that we work with. We reached out to, AI experts, for example, Moodle. So number three is strategic engagements. So at the national, regional, and global, we should, optimize our resources so that we are visible and we occupy those spaces. So I'm very glad that CLADE was able to occupy the space in COP30 and represent GCE as well. That's a very good practice. And so I also have a fourth. So I said just 3 points, but I have a fourth. And this is about social media engagement. Social media has been weaponized by the conservative governments to win elections, to distort history, and, to capture the narrative. And I think it should be one of the things that GCE should look into, how we can, effectively wield social media engagements for our advocacy. Oh, that's all. And thank you very much for this space.
Thank you so much, Maya. That was very, very helpful to shape our collective strategies in not only gender transformative education, but in our broad collective strategies in connecting the national, regional, and global levels, but also the importance of keep working with the feminist movements and the way it also connects with the climate justice agenda and many other the public services agenda and human rights agenda more broadly. This is we will keep this conversation. We will also come back to this during session 3. Thank you so much. To conclude session 2, colleagues, we'll briefly turn to education in emergencies, which we all know is increasingly vital at a time when conflicts and disasters are on the rise. more and more part of our movement's strategic agenda, a key part of our strategic plan, very much present at the national, regional, and global levels priorities. I will invite two colleagues for that. First, Odinakachi Anoru from our member coalition in Nigeria, who has been representing the Southern NGOs within Education Cannot Wait, which is the global fund for education in emergencies, and working alongside the youth's constituency, the teachers' constituency, INGOs constituency, and partners, such great partners such as IME. So there have been important achievements reflecting the new ECW strategic plan, including a clear priority on localization. So Odina Kachin, welcome to this conversation. What have been the challenges, gains, and commitments? What are your reflections and recommendations going forward? So over to you. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Geneva. Good afternoon, dear colleagues, and Happy New Year. Thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this important global discussion. My assignment is quite simple, and my presentation focused on two questions. First, whether there are genuine gains and commitment for education in emergency advocacy, and second, what role GCE can play in standing up for education in a time of escalating global conflict. So we will look forward to share this point and engaging in other presentation as we proceed. Looking at within the EIA context, we realize that education in emergency is no longer marginal. Today we have over 224 million crises that affect children, youth, that lives in context shaped by conflict, climate shocks, and forced displacement. But for emergency is protecting, is no longer reality, not temporary disrupt. Education is increasingly recognized as life-saving, protective, and stabilizing, yet we still remain in a political and financial deprivation. Looking at the question if there have been genuine gain, my answer is yes. There have been genuine gains in EIE advocacy. And one of those gains is the establishment of education in emergency, establishment of ECW as a dedicated global financing mechanism. Another gain is EIE has been integrated into the SDG 4 UN framework and also into humanitarian response. There have been a strong global political recognition of EIE, both national, regional, and global. There have been recognition of EIE. Then there have been a visibility on localization. There have been recognition that national and local actors, including civil society organizations, they must lead in EIE response. Another gain that is very, very critical is the increased support from donor and multilateral institutions. These gains reflect a shift in narrative. As we know, education is no longer seen as optional in crisis-affected countries, but a priority that should be looked into. For what is there is a lot of gaps and challenges. Although despite the progress and the reality that have been made, there is still serious challenges on education in emergency. And one of those challenges is education is on emergency is underfunded. Education in emergency receives less than 2 to 3% of global humanitarian funding, which I think need more advocacy and push to see that there is consistent fund for education in emergency, because it has become a norm. It has become a recurrent decimal in several countries. So we need to be ready. Another gap is there is weak accountability for commitments. Education in emergency financing remains for short term and is a bit unpredictable, and also it's donor driven, which is not meeting the gap and the purpose of the funding. There is also a very big problem in shrinking civil society space and political stability. There have been limited civil society ability to hold system accountable. The government, partners, donor agency, there have been that limitness. And another gap is localization is often empathic. Local CSOs, we are all just consulted, but there is no resources to support what we are doing, and there is no empowerment to support the national and the local NGOs. So this is a very huge gap. This is where GCE comes in.
Sorry
what
to interrupt.
Expected?
Sorry to
What's
interrupt
expected
you.
From...
You have 1 minute, please.
Okay. What's expected of GCE? GCE should look at amplifying voices from crisis-affected contexts, defending education as a right by constantly framing EIE as a non-negotiable human right. GCE should look into monitoring and hold system accountable by pushing governments, donors, and ECW to move from commitment to measurable actions. GCE should also consider advocacy for predictable, flexible, and long-term funding that align with interagency network minimum standard and national education plans. And GCE also should look into advancing relocalization by championing direct funding, leadership, and decision-making power for national and local CSOs. And lastly, they should strive for strong collaboration with humanitarian actors and network. In conclusion, and call for action, EIE must stay central to global education agenda, and GCE must continue to stand firm for education as a right. Just to wrap it off, as we know, we are planning to go for ESCOM meeting in next month. So we are going to convene a meeting in a few weeks ahead of the next ESCOM. So we are going to ensure that we invite you for the meeting so that we can discuss together and have a focus on what will be discussed at the ESCOM meeting. And I'll have enough input as your ESCOM representative on what to present. I know Grant and Jovina are part of my technical committee. We are going to come together to fix this meeting. Please, when you get our invitation, please avail us the opportunity to attend for this briefing and to give us your input and support for the next ESCOM that is coming in February in Switzerland this year by 25th, 24th to 26th of February. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Odina Kachin, for sharing your reflection and experience. As you said, there will be an opportunity very soon to further zoom in on many of these issues, to unpack those different challenges involved in the education in emergencies space. And now to keep talking about this, I'd like to invite Crispin Crispin Williams is also a GCE board member representing NACE, the European and North American region, also to reflect on advocacy opportunities, Crispin, and the importance of strategic partnerships in the education in emergency spaces more broadly. We all know the sector itself has been changing a lot in such an extremely challenging scenario. So what are your reflections and recommendations for our movement in such a challenging context? Over to you, Crispin. You have also 5 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Giovanna. Thank you, Odinakachi, before. We'll obviously cross over some bits, so I'll try and keep myself brief and succinct, go over the two questions that were asked of me. Basically, what opportunities remain untapped by GC's advocacy and how can we successfully maximize them? And what is the importance of partnerships in leveraging these opportunities? So, let's start with the first part. What opportunities remain untapped? And I'll look at both a sort of external and an internal approach of looking at this as to how we successfully maximize our opportunities here. So external is looking at some of the themes that are coming up, linking to EIE education in emergencies and how we can best position GCE and our members and member coalitions in that. So there's three areas I wanted to raise. The first is cross-sector advocacy across EIE in general. Now, we know that the landscape around education has changed drastically. Sadly, there's been a deprioritization both on the policy front, on the funding front. And one of the key messages coming back is the need for the sector to collaborate. And this is something that, we started to do as GCE. So we can't quite say it's untapped, but we can certainly do more of it. And we are looking to do this in relation to actors like INEE and other key actors in the sector, ECW. Odinakachi mentioned about the meeting in February, and hopefully around that time we'll be having a meeting with some of these actors to look at what could be cross-sector collaboration points, what could be some of the advocacy focuses. So again, the need for the sector to come together, and I'll come back a bit more to that on the importance of partnerships in the second part of the answer. Also, climate remains an important part of the discussion. We know certain administrations are downplaying its importance, but it remains crucial both from a policy and a funding perspective. And also, if you look, most climate hit areas are also conflict hit areas, i.e. fragile areas that EIE focuses on and affect GCE members crucially as well. So it's about how does GCE and the CSO membership move to the heart of the debate? And I think it's about linking closer to some of the actors. We've got people like the Greening Education Partnership. We've got ECW with its own work there. So in 2026, again, we will be looking to move closer and work with these partners to position GCE in this growing area of climate in EIE and how we can maximize the impact of our members' voices who are most affected by this. So climate is the second area. The third area is, Odinakachi mentioned, it's localization. Localization is going to be a key theme for 2026, both in terms of the need to reshape the landscape given changing financing arrangements, and also the want for local actors to come forward. And it's important that actors like GC, together with INEE, who sort of speak on behalf of local actors and especially have a strong presence in the global south, excuse my use of that term, but the easy way to describe that the different areas, that we really need to be leading this debate and both shaping the definitions, shaping the strategy. So again, this is something that we need to work more on around how we are letting local actors shape the debate around localization. So those external sides, that's what we need to focus on: cross-sector advocacy to promote EIE, climate and localization. Now the sort of more internal side, which is about how do we maximize the opportunities. And this comes to the sort of the unique selling point, I think, of the global campaign for education. So this is the power of our membership base. This is both in the fact that we're in around 100 countries. We have national education coalitions that could reach national governments like no other organization. So it's about our reach here, but also that unique voice from the ground up, and especially, as said, from local actors and also areas in the global south. And we need to utilize this more. This is all actors are calling to hear more from the ground of these actors. So again, this is something that we need to see as our USP, how we position ourselves when we move forward on EIE. So that's talking about what opportunities remain untapped or could be more explored. Finally, to the second point about importance of partnerships and leveraging these opportunities. Again, as with localization, collaboration is a key theme for 2026. No actor is big enough to solve these issues, and given resource cuts, we need to work together, and there's the importance of having a unified voice as a sector. So all the examples of the work I've talked about have been in collaboration, will be in collaboration with others, and so this is the way that we need to look forward. And in part, this is, as I said, it's showing a unified sector, a harmonized approach, and a shared message, and ultimately all of this strengthens advocacy, because that's what this is about. It's about advocating for the importance of education and remaking it for the landscape that we have. So very brief, because I know that we're a bit pinched for time, but I wanted to talk about those different sides, about how we both open up opportunities and the importance of partnerships in that. And I think GCE has wonderful opportunities given its unique base and voice and the partners that we can work with. So thank you very much, Giovanna. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Crispin. Those are really key and precise points for our collective advocacy. Thank you so much for touching in the cross-sector collaboration and climate and localization. And thank you, colleagues, everyone, for all of these powerful reflections and very inspiring for the year ahead. They give us a very helpful picture of the challenges and a strong sense of where our collective power lies. So before handing over to my colleague Thea, who will take us through session 3, I wanted to invite my colleague Asandis Wadasana. Asandis, are you back here?
Thank you so much, Gio.
Okay, so she can conclude the intervention. She started with at the beginning of the conversation on the importance of youth and students co-creating transformative education. So over to you, Asandis.
Thank you so much, Gio. But I also think in the interest of time, I'll just run through my talking points. I think as previously mentioned, so we have this youth action group that is where young people bring in issues based on their lived experiences. So we get these from like the local, national, and then they're brought onto this platform by representatives of regions, and then we're able to find out commonalities and, you know, shared perspectives. It's also a structure of learning from each other while we also chart how we would like to engage moving forward in policies related to education. I think more and more what's coming up, to Crispin's point, is that there are issues related to the education system that we can find areas of integration like climate change, but there's also issues, social and economic issues post the education system, where young people are also experiencing a lot of unemployment, a lot of social ills that then contribute to this because they've been through like the education system, done what they were taught to do. But now all of these issues come in as a broader area of conversation and things that the Youth Action Group is looking to tackle. But also we do have youth representation at the board level. So that's where we then get all of the agenda items that the Youth Action Group is willing to support. Then they get put forward to the board for general and broader support. I think also some of our more engaging areas have come from, so initially for the cohort 1, it was areas of COVID-19, something that had not been experienced previously. And so the fight to get access for education so that education doesn't stop due to the pandemic. I think for this cohort, issues are more around climate change and reimagining the futures of education, what that will look like given the current state of the climate. I think also with the work that we're doing, so young people are also focusing on doing the work at the ground level. So taking on campaigns such as Gawe, participating in the Gawe Action Weeks, but also with that, taking the themes of that week and then distilling them into youth applications. So for the 2023, around the decolonizing of education financing, young people calling on for governments to put on more funding towards education by implementing progressive tax initiatives.
but also calling for the debt relief that's currently ongoing and has become a global issue. For the 2025, it was also related to the protection of education in emergencies. So in that regard, young people from different contexts in how education affects, in how emergencies have affected their education. So this includes conflict, this includes political instability, this includes, may I just
Hello, Asandiswa. Hello, Asandiswa, are you there? Or is it me who cannot hear you? Can colleagues have a thumbs up to say that you can hear me?
We can hear you. I think Asandiswa's got connectivity issues. Thanks, Thea.
Okay, thank you, Lebo. Thank you for that. Okay, thank you, colleagues. I think because Asandiswa is having a problem connection, she is currently outside of Johannesburg, and therefore she is experiencing problems in internet connection, and therefore we will continue to our discussions for today. So I'm Thea Soriano. I'm from the Global Campaign for Education, and this is the start of our next session. But I would just like to give a few points from Asandiswa, which she was referring to. And because today is the International Day of Education celebration, and and Asandiswa is talking about the power of youth in co-creating education. What we have seen in GCE is that young people has been doing a lot of work, not only in the recent years, but starting in 2015, when Agenda 2030 and SDG 4 have been agreed upon by member states. And as you can see from our statement, we have seen the efforts of young people as knowledge producers and providing evidence to challenge the status quo. They have also participated amidst all the challenges of participation. They have participated in education policy platforms and also formed their own councils. So we have seen that in the Arab region and also in Timor-Leste. And they continue to innovate on some curriculum, on curriculum and co-create curriculum and teaching and learning in their own respective schools and also in learning initiatives. So these are just 3 points, and therefore now we urge member states to continue to continue working with young people, but not in a project style, but more on institutional mechanisms within countries and also in several education platforms. So colleagues, we hope that this gives us an idea of what we have been doing and also the young people have been doing in terms of co-creating education. So now we move to our next session. And I know that we're supposed to end at in a few minutes, but we still have 2 sessions, and so colleagues, please bear with us. So earlier we heard about the first session was talking about political consciousness, the importance of political consciousness. We also heard about connecting with different experts within the field. So we have seen also the different priority agenda of the GCE members of the GCE movement and how we connected with different experts and different organizations to advance our advocacy. Yes, thank you so much. And then there is also the challenge for us to seize opportunities because, for example, we are being challenged to connect not only with organized sectors, but also with unorganized sectors such as the Gen Z, who have their own ways of engaging and also challenging the status quo. So in this session 3, we are going to talk about what has GCE been doing outside of the education sector. So Maya earlier said that ASBE has been engaging AI experts, so not necessarily your traditional experts in the field. And in this session, we are going to talk about engaging SDG4 and also advocating together with other movements. So first session, we talk about education financing. And education financing has been the very core of GCE's advocacy. But so for this session on financing education, I would like to call two colleagues. So one is Ashina. So welcome, Ashina. I see you're turned on your video. And also I would like to call Tanvir so that we can have a conversation on how we can move forward education financing. So Tanvir, very happy that you can give us this moment to share your thoughts. So my question, it is no secret, and we have been doing a lot on education financing. And through this advocacy, GCE has reached out to tax justice movements. We have also reached out to multilateral organizations. We're working with GPE on advocacy. So we're not only, engaging the GPE structure per se, but we're also doing advocacy together. Now, in FFD4, education is one of the biggest sectors that we have seen in FFD4. So Macarena is here. I can see Macarena, and you would remember Macarena led our work in Spain, in Seville, on FFD4. And if you look at our WhatsApp group, there are more than 50 members in that WhatsApp group. However, during FFD4, I don't know if we should use however, but what we did was not only to focus on education financing, but to focus on public services. Now, for Ashina, my question is, when we formed an alliance with the public sector to make a stronger voice for financing education, and this time for financing public services, what do you think are the gains and challenges of having such broad framework in financing? So over to you, Ashina.
Thank you so much, Thea. It's good to see you and to see everyone who's been part of this conversation. Just give me a nod if you can still hear me well. There's a bit of background noise. Okay. Fantastic. So it's a really interesting question, the gains and the challenges of collaborating with the wider public services movement. I think GCE probably started this more systematized engagement with public services, I think around 2022 when we had the Our Future is Public conference, and there was a lot of energy and enthusiasm around working together. And that brought together, I think, 10 different sectors from different public services. And then in 2023, there was not as much momentum within that movement, but then it did pick up again last year, like you mentioned. And I think that it paints a bit of a picture of the challenges that come along with that. I'll start with the challenges, and then I'll end with the more positive gains that will hopefully motivate us to keep going with that. It's hard. It's hard. Just low-hanging fruit, obvious answer is it's difficult to collaborate and coordinate across a much bigger group. We don't yet have the same kind of trust and understanding that we've built within GCE. GCE has been a movement for decades now. There's a way of working. There's almost a shorthand. We know what we mean when we say certain things. We know the kind of strategy that we're taking and the long-term vision that we have within this movement, but it's not necessarily the case with other public services. So when you want to come together and work together, there's a bit of friction as you just get to know one another, get to know the different priorities, the different framing. It can even come down to language, right? That within the education movement, this is the language that we use. These are the positions that we hold on certain things. So for instance, when it comes to like matters collaborating with private sector, privatization, public-private partnerships, education already has a lot of evidence and a very firm position against this because we've seen the negative impact, especially on inclusion, on education systems. But there's other sectors where they're more a bit ambivalent, right? They're still open to it. They're still generating the evidence, so they've not yet come to that conclusion. So just agreeing on positions can be a challenge. Having the trust can be a challenge. Visibility also becomes a challenge, right? Because we won't be able to say education everywhere we want to say it, right? To expressly have it come out that this should be the priority, that we have to, for us, what might feel like watering down the language, that now we're going to just have public services in vague terms or education come at the end of a list of a lot of other things, and this can be a challenge, especially in the context where, unfortunately, there are still donor obligations that a lot of us have, where we need to be able to demonstrate this kind of upfront, direct link to the work that's going on. So if we don't, we're under a bit of pressure to be able to demonstrate that. And so are our colleagues in other sectors. So this sort of fuels the friction where we want to be very visible, but a strategic move for the long term here might be having to reduce our visibility for a greater cause and agenda. But now that's something that you'll have to now negotiate when you're working on your reporting and you're trying to see how to build that in to the report, which we can do. We can do creatively as we build our alliances. It's also extra work to build that alignment, build that trust, be able to have a unified position. And many times, by the time we start collaborating, the conference is coming up already, or the outcome document is already being discussed. So we have to build the ship of our alignment as we are engaging in the process. And that also just adds to the stress and the challenge of managing all of the dynamics with a time crunch. And yet, I'll hasten to add that all of these challenges are worth the fight. It's worth the added challenge because there is so much power in the united voices of not just the education space, but all of the public services coming together to take a certain position. That kind of united voice is not as common within civil society, but so powerful when we're able to have it, because it's harder for the duty bearers, for the governments to ignore, or it's harder for them to find a space to run away from it, because whichever way they might turn, they're going to be hearing the same message. And this is the other advantage, right? That we almost 10x our potential impact because we are able to reach with our message duty bearers we might not be able to reach, or mechanisms we might not be able to reach, because we now have a collective capacity that goes far beyond what we would have alone as GCE, including, like you've said, in the financing space, there are other alliances, organizations that have been working since the formation of the Financing for Development Conference. I think it's a similar process with the tax convention process. Other organizations have been following since the inception of the idea of having a tax convention, and they already have the networks, the inroads, the strategies, and they can really equip the education allies, the education movement, to know how to navigate those spaces as well, both collaboratively and independently. So we gain so much as well from being part of that. And we gain that support in navigating the space. And I think my final thought on this is just as we are in the context of what looks like multilateralism falling apart around us, that unity is really important. That's what we want to see in a renewed multilateral system where we have shared priorities for shared flourishing. And I mean, that's something that we're also going to have to figure out among civil society, how to come together and work together for shared success. Because just like we say, education is a right. We know that rights are interdependent and indivisible, right? We can't have a flourishing school if those children, those learners don't have food, right? Don't have water and sanitation. So the same way we have to work together because those rights are indivisible, that's what we also want to push forward to see in the multilateral system more broadly. I'll stop there and hand back to you, Thea.
Thank you so much, Ashina. I remember we have initially GCE, we have framed our advocacy around human rights obligation and also the right to development. And now, because we are pushing for systemic changes at the global level, and therefore it is our responsibility as well to talk of the larger, the broader agenda. And I know that for GCE and for the education sector, Tax Ed Alliance, we always say financing public services and then including public education. So we always want to put that language. And I know that it's also a a challenge and also at the same time a continuing work that we're doing in also advocating within civil society, right? So it's not only with across governments but also within civil society, especially if you're talking of tax justice networks. We have to be there, we have to make our calls visible, and then we also have to negotiate in terms of language. So thank you so much, Ashina, and I'll come back to you if there is time on some. Tanvir is laughing if there is time. Okay, so now we are talking of public financing of education. And in FFD4, even UNESCO had a side event on financing public services and saying that education, the case of education. So Tanvir, everyone's talking about public financing. And just this morning, you had the roundtable discussion in Nairobi, and I'm sure it talked about domestic resource mobilization for public education. So how can we use the GPE financing campaign to further push the realization of financing quality public education for all? So over to you, Tanvir.
Thanks very much, Thea. Can you hear me? Just checking. Yes. All right.
Yes.
Okay, great question. $1 million or $1 billion question, I might say. So I'll briefly talk about two aspects of GP's work on finance. First of all, the broader aspect of sustainable financing, which is the framework we're trying to use, especially after the FFD, and briefly about our own financing campaign, right, which will act as catalytic funding for changes at country level. So the whole sustainable financing agenda builds on the broader global debate on the future of development finance, not only in education, as you mentioned. And in the context of this global discussion, the most recent of which was in Seville, right, Financing for Development Conference, partners have recognized the need to rethink how concessional, public, private resources can actually work together to support sustainability and self-reliance, considering the multilateral system is looking pretty shaky at this point. And so together with development banks, bilateral agencies, and philanthropic actors, GPE has helped to translate these system-wide reflections into what they mean for education sector, how to make education financing more coherent, country-led, and fiscally sustainable over time. It's a pretty ambitious agenda, and it represents a shift from mobilizing funds for the sector to structuring finance for long-term sustainability, because that's what we need to look at. And it moves beyond just fragmented projects or standalone instruments to look at how education is financed within a country's overall fiscal and economic architecture. So as you mentioned in the beginning, it's moving beyond just looking at education as a sort of a narrow area, but positioning it in the broader context of fiscal and economic architecture. And the starting point is not how much we spend on education, but how the system can plan, allocate, and sustain investment in education over time for generating fiscal dividends, economic diversification, and societal progress. And so education becomes a strategic mean for greater development and overall economic sustainability. And rather than addressing spending gaps in isolation, it's about starting with every country's macro fiscal reality and articulating all available sources of capital, domestic, concessional, philanthropic, and even private, according to their comparative advantages. It breaks the silos between these sources and places government leadership at the center, asking how much needs to be invested, with what type of capital, and under what conditions can these resources reinforce one another. So it's about the goal to build a self-sustaining ecosystem for financing the sector, where short-term catalytic funds help unlock long-term domestic resources. And as I mentioned, in this approach, domestic public finance is the anchor as the only truly durable source of education investment. And as Ashina has mentioned, all the conversation about taxation is to again enrich the domestic resource base. And ODA and philanthropy can act as, again, more like catalytic capital rather than covering all the gaps, unlocking reforms and mitigating early risks. And private capital is only strictly complementary, mobilized very selectively and only when aligned with public objectives under government leadership, because we have also seen all the stress between public and private capital. So the result is a country-specific pathway grounded in fiscal realism that integrates all sources of finance around national systems and a costed, reform-first roadmap for sustainable education investment. But the question is, it looks like a theoretical framework, right? How will the implementation take place? And we feel confident and we have high hopes that through the existing partnership mechanisms at country level, led by the government and supported by local education groups, development partners, and obviously civil society. It all, I mean, and we're not saying it's starting from zero. We think it already happens in our partner countries through coordinated planning, dialogue, and grant-linked reforms. But the next phase is about making these existing practices more intentional and coherent and leveraging partnerships more strategically in areas where further progress is needed, such as fiscal dialogue and alignment on country systems. And the goal is to ensure that financing, policy reform, and partnership efforts all reinforce each other within a national system. And civil society has a very important role to play as an accountability layer, complementing all these technical and financial efforts with public oversight, right? And holding the government and the funders accountable. So together, alignment, coordination, and accountability make the system more efficient and predictable, turning multiple funding streams and sometimes fragmented streams into one coherent and harmonized investment narrative where financing enables transformation and transformation has sustains financing. So that's the intention. And I know that we have been talking to civil society and drawing inspiration from civil society, the GCE members who have been focusing on this for a long time. So, and I also wanted to briefly talk about the GP financing campaign that you have mentioned that is ongoing and where many of the GCE members are actively engaged. You have seen the advocacy toolkit. You have seen the sort of motto of multiplying possibility in terms of highlighting the potential that education unleashes. And here you and the colleagues have received some of the technical resources with the International Education Day and going forward. And this will be a key factor for mobilizing fundamental resources for education, which also includes resources for advocacy and for civil society through like Education Out Loud, right, which I work on. And so just to say that from GP Secretariat, we're very excited about this sort of approach on sustainable financing, and we're looking forward to collaborating as we move together towards hopefully financing education adequately in a very challenging context. And thank you for this opportunity to represent GP.
Thank you so much, Tanvir. And that is a very good way of also connecting our discussions on civil society efforts in FFD4 around public financing. And now you are talking about the different financing schemes or financing strategies that can support. And good to know that the anchor would be public education. So thank you so much. And very important that as an education sector, we're not only looking at education financing, but we're also looking at the macro level, right? Because of the different developments currently around financing, is very important for us to understand that as well. Not only on specific campaigns, but overall on locating our education financing strategies and advocacy. Thank you so much, Tanvir. And thank you, Ashina. I hope we have more time to discuss, and I can see Macarena. However, we still have one more session. So thank you for that session. And so now we move to a discussion of the high-level political forum. Again, in the high-level political forum, the GCE movement has gone beyond its comfort zone, and we are engaging the other SDGs, the other sectors in the SDGs to campaign for SDG 4. So with me, we have Seconiela Mapeja. Seconiela is the National Executive Director of the Lesotho Council of NGOs. So Seconiela, are you here? And Unfortunately, David Kumi, the executive director of the Papua New Guinea Education Advocacy Network, could not join us because they are experiencing heavy rains and strong winds in PNG. But good to have Second Yela here. So Second Yela is has been engaged, the coalition or the Lesotho Council of NGOs has been engaged in the VNR, in the Voluntary National Review, and also the High Level Political Forum in 2025. So, Second Yela, can you tell us your experiences in the Voluntary National Review and also your experience in producing the SDG 4 Spotlight Report and how it helped you in your VNR engagements at the country level? And also, the question is, are you able to advance your SDG 4 advocacy when you joined the VNR and also the High Level Political Forum? So over to you, Seconyela.
Thanks, Tia. Thanks, everyone. My voice is a little bit hoarse because of common cold here, flu, but I'll try to squeeze it. Thanks very much for this opportunity. And colleagues around the globe, good morning, good afternoon. It's been a pleasure for us to participate in this high-level political forum meeting as an organization. When the VNR began, after countries pledged to be voluntarily reviewed, were able to come to the high-level political forum meeting in 2019 the first time. So I will compare the two and try to also elucidate how important is it when now you have a spotlight report vis-a-vis when you did not have it, because the first time we come to high-level political forum, we not have the spotlight report. Maybe it was because SDG 4 was part of those SDGs that were being reviewed in 2019. And since then, SDG 4 has not been part of those that are being reviewed. And the Spotlight Report helps a lot in terms of ensuring that and showing. Spotlight Report is not only important for the high-level review, but even in country processes. Spotlight Report is very important because the report now that the country develops is cognizant of the relationship between SDG 4 and all the other SDGs that have been selected for review. So the Spotlight Report, what it does, it wants to say you are taking of the under 5, making, for example, the under 5 mortality, and then you're saying, but there is pre-primary education that the ECCD that you know them, and if you do not give them education, then you will have a high rate of mortality in that context. We're talking about the gender-based violence in terms of the SDG, and then we're saying through education you have a long way to cap that, and also in climate change, education and climate change, as it has been said. So we are trying in that spotlight to say, much as SDG 4 is not under spotlight, under review, but when you talk of SDG 4.7, which is education for sustainable development, you take it that it means that education would help any other sustainable development goal to be achieved. So then it was a very important exercise, and we also are very pleased to tell everyone that GCE worked with us as we prepared this report, and it was very helpful exercise. But now let's come to the high-level political forum itself now, where you represent major NGOs and major groups there. It is an eye-opening exercise, and the way now you write your response to the country's report, it is very helpful in terms of the way it was started. And what was unique for us was that we also wanted our report to be more on recommendations to the country, to say, because we knew that if we were to ask a lot of questions, we would get responses like they have in Parliament when ordinary MPs ask questions. When is the minister aware that there is this shortage here and there? And the minister will just come and answer to say, yes, the ministry is aware, and given lack of funding, when funding permits, they will do that. But if you do recommendations, then they have a program that they would accept those recommendations of yours. And for instance, for us, we have had a long issue about participation, inclusive participation of other groups like youth, as Cindy has been saying, then we have these recommendations to say, in order for us to leave no one behind, can we make it a mandatory that all sectors are represented when these reports are being formed? And those were taken. And immediately after the high-level political forum meeting, when we come back home, the meeting was confirmed that from now onwards, this is how we're going to approach it. And you as a coalition of NGOs, please give us categories of those groups that would want to participate. And therefore, we had to have youth, we have to have women, we have to have, in our country, of course, the LGBTIQ community are accepted to operate. So they are part of the national dialogue. So they were also part of that. So it is important that exercise is important, that it helps with the advocacy back home. And your advocacy back home is half done when you have done the spotlight report and when you are able to present that when the countries are presenting in the high-level political forum. So that is, and you're also able to interface with other global movements. And as we started this conversation, we are talking about a shrinking space for multilateralism. And like we're saying, you come renewed to say, indeed, much as some of us are from small countries, but we will not remain silent. We would have to advocate for multilateralism, because if we go solo, it will mean the survival of the fittest, and the smaller nations and smaller groups and other disadvantaged groups would be swallowed in the long run. So it is important for us, and that's how important it was, Tia, for us to come and contribute. And thanks for Giovanni and you and others that are holding our hand as we do both the spotlight and the report itself when we were in the high-level political forum.
Thank you so much, Seconiela, for your sharing. And indeed, it is very important, no matter what your country is, it's important to highlight the advocacy at the country level. And colleague Seconiela spoke on behalf of civil society, not even GCE, not even the education academia stakeholder group, but the whole civil society. And he delivered the statement for Lesotho from civil society. So that's also shows us how the education sector or the national education coalitions can also lead in the SDGs front, not only in the SDG front. So thank you so much, and well done, Seconiela, for your work. And now, colleagues, I read from, we have very little time, but let me read the comment or the question from Macarena. And she's asking how GCE can build a position on debt swaps, debt prices, debt sustainability, especially in the coming months. And I know that Spain is very much into the debt issue, and therefore this is also very important. So this is something that we have noted, Macarena, and indeed we are going to take on debt, especially since education and health are the two sectors that have been affected by debt. So thank you for that. And so now we're now at the end of our program and webinar. So I would like to call Grant Kasuanjete again to close this session to discuss with us our ways forward. So over to you, Grant.
Thank you so much, Thea, and a big thank you to all our speakers. Let's give them a thumbs up, to show that they have really delivered, an excellent session. For us, we've really heard quite a lot from the political consciousness that you cannot engage into this work if there is no political sense or understanding as to what is happening. We have also gone through different pieces of work, our representations that we are dealing with, but also to look at how, as a movement, we can actually move together as one, building alliances, looking at the evaluation, so that carries us all along, so that we keep on learning from all of this. So thank you so much. There is a poll that has come on your screen. Can I please invite you to click on that one? It's a very simple one. We want to get a sense as to how, this session has really helped you. So, thank you so much for attending. We want just to speak very briefly we want to be a movement that keeps time. If you can just allow us some 2 minutes, we just want to talk about Global Action Week 2026. So I'll ask Thea very quickly to just, briefly tell us where we are, what should we be expecting. Over to you, Thea.
Thank you, Grant. In December last year, we sent out a survey for members to respond to, initially because the Global Action Week for Education is supposed to focus on digital education for 2026. However, we see the opportunities that are presented to us and also the challenges in terms of education financing. And therefore, we have voted for education financing as the focus of our GAWE 2026. And this will happen in April, most probably third week of April. And when we talk of education financing, we are going to talk about strategic issues and education financing. So it's domestic resource mobilization, it's ODA for education, it's also progressive taxes to sustainably finance education. And of course, part of the campaign will be to support the GPE replenishment campaign. And we are going to we have started our preparations, and GCE will convene the campaigns and advisory group this January so that we can start our communications plan and also our messaging. So I think that is helpful. Grant, over to you.
Thank you so much, Thea. So let's look up, to that campaign. We work together with, GPE and ECW as well, to ensure that we advance, the financing. We all know that we need more financing, and, we'll work together towards that. Those that are part of the campaigns working group, please look up for emails that will come from Thea, so that, you can be part of all of this. We want this campaign to be really the biggest and the best that we've ever done as the global campaign for education. So looking forward to that. But thank you very much, everyone. Thanks to all our speakers. Thank you so much for making time. And thanks to all the GCE members that attended this event. We wouldn't have had it if you were not there. So thank you so much for making time to be part of it. Thank you so much, the Secretariat, Thea, Giovanna, Pumza, Sama, and many others that really worked so hard to ensure that this event happens. So thank you so much. And lastly, thanks to all the board members of this GCE that participated in the event. Thank you so much for starting us very well this year. That we are starting with the understanding that we need to grow our movement, build alliances, and sharpen our political consciousness. So thank you so much, and good evening, good day, good morning to everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.